And we are live. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Bigfoot Odyssey's Researchers Reports. We have a great show for you tonight. Ooh, our guest disappeared. I'm Kerry Daniela. With me, as always, producer and co-host of the report, Miss Daniela Iolo. How are you, dear?
I'm good, thank you.
All right. Well, our guest for this evening, you've probably seen him on Monster Quest Travel Channel. He's got several books out. We've got The Essential Guide to Bigfoot, Woodknox, Volume 1, our Journal of Sasquatch Research, and A Menagerie of Mysterious Beasts. That's just a few. He's got many more. I think those are just the latest books, aren't they? Welcome, Mr. Ken Gerhard. How are you, sir?
Good evening, folks. Thank you so much for having me on. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with you tonight.
Oh, no, man. The honor is all ours. Just want to say right quick, everybody in the chat, we appreciate you guys keeping it civil and clean for us. Y'all be nice to each other. We'll probably use the last 15, 20 minutes of the show for Q&A. So if you have questions for Ken, make sure you put those all in caps. Makes it a lot easier for us to pick them out. But just make sure you save them for the last part of the show, because if you throw them up there now, they're probably not going to get out. And maybe I'll cover some of the questions that you'll have. So, Ken, man, you know, I got to meet you at what was the East Texas? What do they call that down there?
Southeast Texas.
That's right, the Southeast Texas Conference, the only conference I've ever been to, and actually got to meet a lot of the guys that I followed for years, and it was really cool. You did a promo with us, and that was awesome too. We definitely appreciated that. So let's just dive into before Bigfoot. Okay, what was was there a catalyst? Did you have an encounter? Did something that was at just interest that got you started with this?
It's just been a lifelong interest and passion of mine, really. But I think there were a lot of, looking back, there were a lot of influences in my childhood. My father was a forestry professor at the University of Minnesota. We spent a lot of time in the outdoors, and so I loved animals. My first pet, was a caiman, which is a small alligator, and
right.
So I always loved kind of the creatures, but I also loved monster movies, and Godzilla and all of those great movies, Planet of the Apes, the original versions and stuff. So when I first found out about Bigfoot, I was about 8 or 9 years old, and I just was watching a TV show one Saturday morning, and something just clicked. I was just completely engrossed in the possibility that there could be this, real monster, basically a kind of a combination of an animal and a monster, which has combined my favorite interests. But what I always tell people is that, my mother was a huge influence, and she used to tell me about different cryptids like the Yeti and the Mothman and stuff. And she loved to travel, so she took me on a lot of amazing vacations. I got to travel all over the world when I was very young, and a lot of amazing places. And then when I was 15 years old, we visited Loch Ness in Scotland, and I got to kind of look into the Loch Ness monster at a young age. And so it's just been a lifelong passion and interest of mine, really. I've never had a 100% bona fide sighting. I've had some interesting experiences and things, but so I'm not one of those people that had kind of a life-changing event or encounter. I know researchers that have gotten into the field that way, of course.
Right.
But it's been an amazing. Now, I certainly never planned to do this as a career, so it was just I've been very fortunate. I pursued other things when I was younger, but this has always been with me, cryptozoology, and it's just something I really love.
Well, I think that's the thing. To me, it's more rare to find someone like you that not just has an interest, but does anything of note in the subject and hasn't had that all moments, that moment of sudden realization where you didn't know anything was going on, and then all of a sudden here's this thing in front of you. Most people are kind of that do anything with it are thrust into it, to my experience. You meet a lot of people like that, so it's a rarity to find people like you. Lyle Blackburn's another that I would put in that category. Rarities. You hardly see anyone like that. So to me, that's good. And
Well, maybe more so in this day and age, but you got to remember the three of the quote unquote, or actually four of the quote unquote four horsemen of Bigfoot research, Renee DeHinden, John Green,
Yes,
Peter
the
Byrne,
giants.
Grover Kernetz. None of those guys ever had sightings, and they spent 40 years looking. So
Right,
so
but
I think it's
there's a level of intellect there. I call those the giants. We're standing
well,
on the shoulders of giants, and there is,
yeah,
with people that have a
yeah, but
sighting, there's no choice to the type of person that's going to do that. It's just like I suppose I would think that that's just a lightning strike thing. It happens, and rarely do you find someone like the four horsemen, like you just said. People that that carry it farther than
yeah. Well, I
just
think a
looking
lot of
into it.
people that have had, yeah.
Uh-oh.
Breaking up.
Yep, we're losing you, Ken.
Frozen up. I think he's gone.
If you can hear us, Ken, your internet is bad. And while hopefully he's getting that sorted out, and something that was really refreshing to me, and I think I might have mentioned this last time on a late show, was we were watching The Voice, and they had to do it via, I don't know, it was Skype or however they did it, but it was like 22 different streams going on at one time because of COVID. Everybody's at their house, and they had the same problems that we have here. So the whole internet issue, people freezing up. Hopefully Ken will join us back here shortly. But it was, when I saw that, I was like, good. It's not just us.
Everywhere. Yeah.
It happens when you do these live streams this way. It's just part of it.
Yeah, you can't guarantee anything, can you?
No. Well, I do want to shout out real quick. I did go and film this past Saturday up in North Mississippi. Nobody showed up. I got 4.5 hours of footage from drone footage, and I got a good interview with Joe Flippo. Very interesting guy, has had a lot of experiences with these creatures. I interviewed some of his family also. But I just want to shout out and thank the people that have supported us since the last time that I shouted out. Miss Matita, Lindsay Bay, Jerry Ham, who actually helped me get up there, and Marty Janowiak. Thank you all so much for the support. We certainly do appreciate that. I know it's tough for everybody right now, and every little bit helps and counts. But it was a blessing for us to be able to drive up there, a 4.5 hour drive up there, and do this filming. I wouldn't have been able to do it without those guys. So thank you so much. All right. Well, hopefully Ken's getting this stuff sorted out here.
Have you got anything else for the Shudder?
I'm working on, I just put out a collection. It was like a 38.5 minute video that I just put out for the Shudder, but I'm working on, that's Ken messaging me now.
Just juggling to get back on.
Yeah. What I'm working on right now is some viewer submissions that are, is it in notes? What is it in? I'm looking for it right now. Okay, he's switching to his computer. Yeah, it's like clairvoyance, where people have had dreams that came true, or there he is. You got him.
Hello.
There he is.
Hey, sorry guys, can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we got you.
My
We got
phone,
you.
I don't know what happened. My phone just took a dump. It was just the weirdest thing. It's usually pretty reliable. So
It happens. I was just saying that I was so relieved. We were watching The Voice, which is NBC, and they were doing this live stream thing because of COVID. And it was like 22 streams going on at one time, and they were having the same exact problems that we have here with this show. So,
oh well,
yeah,
I'm facing the other way, so my backdrop's not as cool. But hopefully,
that's all right.
Hopefully this will work.
You see my backdrop back here. So this is my office, and it's
no,
green.
you're styling, man. It looks good. Okay, so fingers crossed. This again, I apologize. My phone is usually pretty dependable for these things, but who knows?
That's okay. You're back, and that's all that matters.
The-
Yeah, we'll talk about the Shudder. I got that video coming out tomorrow, so we were just going over some things while you were gone and filling some airspace.
Okay, well, good. Well, we're back. So basically, yeah, I was just talking about how I think there are more sightings reported these days because of awareness. And so as back in the day, maybe if someone had a sighting, it wasn't as much of a life-changing experience because they just blocked it out of their mind and thought, I don't know what I just saw. It doesn't fit within the context of the paradigm of my reality. Whereas these days, because people are aware of Bigfoot and, you know, TV shows and different things that, you know, they see it and, you know, maybe it doesn't register at first, but then they realize, oh my God, I think I just saw Bigfoot. So I don't know, just.
Right. And, you know, something else that I thought about before is, you know, people that just get a glimpse, you know, before awareness would have thought probably it was some kind of weird looking bear.
Yeah.
You know, if they didn't get a good look at it. So, I mean, what is there to report really? You know, around here, South Mississippi, even if you look at a sighting report map, there's a hole right over South Mississippi because to see it, there's nothing to report. It's just one of those things, but they didn't, you know, it's not called Bigfoot or Sasquatch around here. It's a booger, you know? So they were seen. It just was never reported. And I wonder what that ratio is there, but let's, I'm gonna let Daniela get into what kind of experiences you've had. I'm interested in this last book that you just put out here. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, whatever you guys want to talk about is fine.
What do you do for your research? I mean, how do you research for these things? What do you go through?
Well, I'm a generalist as far as cryptozoology goes. So obviously I've been involved in Bigfoot research for decades, but I also investigate lake monsters and thunderbirds and black panthers and all kinds of mystery animals. So in that respect, you know, each individual case is really a completely different animal, literally, because, you know, depending on what type of habitat you're in or what types of tools you might be using, you know, if you're looking for a lake monster, obviously there's sonar and underwater cameras, and, you know, thunderbirds is something else. So I love doing field research like a lot of investigators. You know, I love getting out in the field, putting my boots on the ground. Love to travel and explore new places. I admittedly haven't been in the field much, obviously this year, but even last year and the year before, just I'm juggling a lot. And, you know, when I did go into the field, it was usually in kind of my backyard type scenario. And that's one thing I try to always encourage investigators is play your home field advantage. You know, it may sound really cool to travel 3 states away to some place where you've heard of a Bigfoot sighting, but if you have the advantage to working a particular area over and over again, then you can really become acquainted with, you know, the ecosystem there. You learn a lot more about environmental factors and things. So there's nothing wrong with, you know, if you think there's Bigfoot activity or any type of cryptid near you, you know, work that area. And so, you know, I'm here in Texas, don't have a lot of Bigfoot sightings in where I'm at in central Texas. Most of them are in the east. So I do tend to travel when I'm doing a lot of Bigfoot research. It's in the eastern kind of piney thickets of East Texas, kind of near where we were at that conference. Also, travel over to Louisiana sometimes. Oklahoma has a lot of activity, southeast Oklahoma, and even Arkansas, and you know, Boggy Creek and the Fouke Monster. So that's kind of my main area. I have traveled Bigfoot or investigated Bigfoot around the country from Alaska to Florida to, you know, Oregon, New York, wherever. So, and even done some jungle investigations, expeditions. But, you know, so I love just doing field work, but it's, you know, every case is different. It just depends on what you're looking for. I don't do a lot of investigations based on tips. For example, if I get a lot of emails and things, someone say, hey, I've got Bigfoot activity on my property, come up here to Ohio right now. I'm just not in a position to do that, unfortunately, but I will try to correspond with someone and look at their evidence. And if it gets really promising, then, you know, maybe there's a chance I would pursue that.
Yeah, we kind of get the same thing.
Drink of water here and getting a little.
No problem. Not we get the same thing, not as much as we used to.
Getting some allergies here, and that's one thing we have in Central Texas is lots of.
Oh yeah, same thing here, South Mississippi. So this the essential guide.
Oh yeah.
The last book, the essential guide to Bigfoot. Can you just kind of give us a summary of what to expect with that?
Well, yeah. I mean, as I said, I've investigated Bigfoot for many years. It never occurred to me to write a book because there are some excellent books out there and a lot of good research has been published. But what I've found through the years, particularly in recent years, is that there's just so much misinformation out there, you know, particularly on the internet. Lots of facts kind of getting skewed, lots of hoaxing and, you know, misinterpretations and things. So the point of writing the Essential Guide to Bigfoot was to try to sort of combine all of the best, most accurate information with regard to the Bigfoot phenomenon, relying heavily on the foundational history and research that we talked about. That, you know, a lot of people don't realize that, you know, Bigfoot was around long before Finding Bigfoot, dating back to the 1950s, and Sasquatch from the 1920s, and you have Native American legends. And so, you know, there's a lot of that foundational information. And let's be clear, guys, there's obviously no expert in the field of Bigfoot, and I don't try to portray myself as the all-knowing expert.
That's why you're here.
But what you do have is researchers that have spent a lot more time and also that look at the data with a more objective point of view, you know, and unbiased. And so I think there are a lot of things that most of the experienced Bigfoot investigators, who I'm honored to work with, a lot of them, a lot of things that we agree on in terms of, you know, what do they really look like? You know, what are their habits and behaviors? You know, all of the different, there's a lot of details, you know, kind of in the mix. So that's kind of what the book is about, is just trying to provide, it's a primer. So it's kind of an introduction to people that are interested in the Bigfoot subject, and it won't lead you astray. It'll give you very accurate information in terms of how things really unfolded in particular cases, what the evidence is, you know, different opinions and by various academics and things like that. There's a chapter that does include some good sightings, you know, kind of well-known sightings. There's a chapter on my own research, which I said spans across the continent. There's a chapter on something called Littlefoot, which I think is an overlooked area of Bigfoot research, reports of these little dwarf-sized, hairy man-like creatures that seem to be something other than Bigfoot. They're much smaller. And yeah, that's, you know, and also sociology, because, you know, you have to acknowledge with a phenomenon like Bigfoot that's very provocative, there are a lot of different opinions and conspiracy theories and things that are, you know, kind of a lot of sociological and psychological factors as well.
Well, we've done documentaries from Florida to, we've done 12 in 9 different states, from Florida to Nebraska, and there seems to be a very broad range or idea of how these creatures behave. It's never exactly the same. You know, you can nail down the immutable characteristics, but there's always some difference in there somewhere. How would you explain that? Do you think it's just because they're different from place to place? You think that's accurate?
Well, yeah. I mean, you know, there are zoological reasons for that. I mean, if you look at any species, and, you know, one species I often use as an example are mountain lions, Puma concolor, also known as cougars, panthers, painters, whatever. There's something like 19 different subspecies of mountain lions. They're the most widespread large mammal in the Americas. They go all the way from Alaska all the way down to the southern tip of South America. And mountain lions from Mexico look and behave differently than mountain lions from Colorado or mountain lions from the Amazon. So, you know, it has to do with different environmental factors. Their habitat, you know, might affect what they eat, how big they get, how they react, you know, their interactions with humans and other animals in certain areas. So all of that would make sense for Bigfoot too, that, you know, if you have a Sasquatch in Northern California is going to probably be different from a Sasquatch in Mississippi, because it's a completely different type of habitat, different food sources. different interactions with humans and things like that. So, you know, to my point of view, that kind of makes sense that you would have a little bit of that kind of variation from place to place.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I can't disagree with that. You know, I tend to, one more point before I hand it to Daniela, I tend to take it maybe a little deeper than that as far as the Sasquatch goes, and as far as intelligence and behavior and having the ability to plan, not necessarily led by their instincts so much, but, you know, having the ability to choose and have that free will, more or less. You know, I compare it to the Native American tribes, you know, 18 million Native Americans on this and just in the lower 48 in Canada, you know, the last 1,000 years, 480 different tribes, 400 offshoots, and they all spoke a different language. They all acted different. You know, even though it was this essentially the same, different areas produced something completely different because they weren't all connected. So that's kind of how I equate these creatures with that, putting them together. If you want to take it a step higher and
Sure.
and look at them in that respect. So, all right, Daniela, have at it.
Well, I was just thinking when you're talking about researchers there, and like, you know, we focus so much on Bigfoot and what it's about, but we don't really focus on the researchers. And I mean that there's those people that are, you know, set in their paradigms and won't move out of it, and therefore the research doesn't go any. We don't get any further in this subject, and I think that's a lot of people, a lot of researchers are like that, unfortunately, because of, like you say, misinformation and people repeating things. And I just wonder how far are we going to go before people realize we're not actually, some of this research is kind of pointless, and that's, don't want to upset anybody, but we've been doing it over and over and over and over again, and some of it's not going anywhere. A lot of it's not getting us any more new information. In the time I've been looking into this subject, I don't know anything new about Bigfoot than what I did, say, 5 years ago.
Well, you're right. To some extent, it seems like we've been kind of going in circles for a while now. You know, I think that in some respects, there needs to be more of a unified effort, right? So hopefully there would be an opportunity. And a few years ago, there were some guys that were trying to put something like that together, where we would basically have standard procedures in the Bigfoot field in terms of what's acceptable evidence, peer review, which is very important. You know, if I find a piece of evidence, I want to share it with you guys, Kerry, and, you know, you take a look, tell me what you think, and vice versa, you know, and not kind of get boxed into our own little, you know, worlds here but, you know, a lot of Bigfoot investigators are very kind of different types of people, you know, very passionate and very strong-willed, pig-headed, as John Green used to say about Bigfoot researchers. So a lot of Bigfoot researchers don't want to work with, you know, they want to keep all their evidence to themselves, and they've got very set opinions. And so, you know, I think that's a problem when we can't unify and kind of all put everything together in one, you know, basket, so to speak, where we have all the evidence together and we have different people assigned to work on different areas or aspects of the mystery. So, you know, but unfortunately, that's, I think, just a state of the fact that, you know, Bigfoot research is viewed as obviously a pseudoscience. We don't get a lot of respect from the scientific community, and there's no financial backing really either. I mean, everyone's kind of going out of their own pocket to pay for their research. So, right. You know, that's why laymen like us do it. But you make great points, Danielle. I mean, it is frustrating. I think there are, if you dig deep enough, I think there are little things here and there that are found. You know, for example, the Olympic Project up in Washington State a few years ago found what they believed to be a series of Bigfoot nests. There was a large group of people working on the situation. They collected hair samples. They've, you know, been trying to get them DNA tested. The nests that they described actually fit in well with nests that have been found in Alaska by other researchers years ago. And, you know, so, I mean, you have these little things, you know, they're tantalizing and scant when you get these little hints of this and that. But Yeah, no, I feel your pain, you know, and I think I think the reality of Bigfoot research is we all want to be optimistic and think we're going to prove it in our lifetimes. But the four horsemen that we mentioned earlier, Green, DeHinden, Krantz, Byrne's still alive, but I think all of those guys knew that they might not find the answers that they, you know, spent their whole lives searching for, and so they kind of passed on the mantle to a next generation, and you know, hopefully we can prove it in our lifetimes, but we ultimately may have to, you know, pass it on to another generation of researchers that are coming up and see if they can solve this thing once and for all.
Well, if I could, something that I see is we've been going this for a while in this, let's say 60 years plus in actual, you know, what we call research, looking for this creature. And we really haven't gotten that far and over that period of time. So you can look at this as it's still relatively new. And there's not, it's a small group, it's a small faction. And we're not all equally situated from economically to intellectually. The people that are into this, it's a pretty broad range of types of people that do this. So I think when someone new especially comes into it, things like tracks and structures and just looking for evidence are exciting, you know. And then people that, you know, they get a YouTube channel and they present these things, and then all of a sudden they're starting to find all of these things, and there's an excitement in the mundane, in the things that we've already seen 100,000 times, and then but they're getting new people interested in it. So it's all about, I think it's got to get a lot bigger. I think once it gets bigger and more people are actually aware, which is what we try to do here, is push awareness. It's the only angle we really have, is to push awareness, because you can't prove any of this, I think, without a type specimen anyway. Mm-hmm. But I think that's probably part of it too, is that even though it's been around for a while, it's still relatively new, and especially because we just don't know that much.
It's a fair point. You're right. I mean, in terms of other types of research, it is very new. And, you know, another problem I see, and this goes back to what you were talking about, Daniela, I meet a lot of researchers that want me to come out to work in their areas or join them or whatever. And it seems like there's too much kind of overzealous, and I'm probably going to tick some people off too, but there's too much overzealous interpretation. I mean, I constantly am meeting researchers around the continent that want me to come out to an area, and they tell me all these things. Well, I've identified 9 different individuals, and I know all that. It's like, I just, you know, there's no way you could know all that stuff. You know, if you were your Jane Goodall, your Diane Fossey, you know, you don't, you may very well have Bigfoot activity and you're finding tracks and different things, but you can't, it's not the job of a field researcher to now suddenly become also the lab scientist that looks at the evidence and writes a thesis or a paper. You can't do both, because you're too emotionally attached, you know, sometimes to the subject matter, and you want to be the one that proves Bigfoot real, you know, is real. You've got all this stuff that you're finding, but it's dangerous for investigators and researchers to suddenly try to take all of that on. And that's why I bring up peer review again. You know, find other people to work with that have a different perspective and that might look at your evidence with a different, more critical eye, and be open-minded to their interpretations and things.
The word you use, personal, that's the problem, is people take this so personally, because they invest a lot of time as well, which I understand. But, you know, you can't defend something that you don't know. You can't do that, but that's what people want to do. And so when you want to challenge them, and I use that term in a sense of questioning, which is, you know, discussion, be civil, you can't do it, because the minute you know, pick something, oh no, you know, what do you know, sat behind your computer at home, you know, in England? Well, you know, I don't know, but that's why I'm asking. That's why, you know, if you want to show me something, you really need to show me it. And you know, those blurry photos are another thing that I just cannot. I can't do it anymore. I can't look at the blob squatch anymore. It's not healthy for anybody.
No, and this is probably a controversial. Sorry to cut you off there, you know, but this is probably a controversial stance. But I think we really need to move past photographic evidence. I think we just need to completely chuck that out the window, because in this day and age, with the technology that's available, I mean, as you said, blurry photos, you can only look at so many of those and they're not convincing. But even if someone comes up with a great looking photo or image, it's going to be scrutinized because it's just too easy for someone to fabricate something with software, you know. So
Yeah.
it's literally got to the point where we just have to let go of trying to get photographic evidence. I think all the effort needs to be put on what you said, Kerry, a type specimen, or as I tell people, just a part. If you find a tooth or a bone, a femur, I mean, any of that would prove Bigfoot's real. And if these things do exist, they're very big and there's a lot of them, there are remains out there somewhere, you know. So I think hopefully that would become the new focus.
Well, to me, you know, juxtaposed to that position, because we can't prove any of this without a type specimen, we have to be able to convince other people that these creatures are out there. So I think as long as the pictures are good and they're convincing, you know, even though we do have this issue in the digital age where you can, you know, mess with things. Video, you can attach your metadata to video so anybody can see if you've done anything to it. So if it's good enough and there's a story there, and I think that's the important part, is not just putting a video out there. If you happen to catch one and walking through the woods, is tell everything, you know, complete transparency, who you are, what you were doing before, during, after, everything that you went through, the whole process. I think those can be important for convincing other people that these creatures are actually out there, because that's all we've got is trying to help convince others, that at least give them more of us, get them off the fence, even if they're there, you know, that, okay, yeah, maybe these creatures are out there. Let me get out there and look. So I think video more than just still images are important in that respect. Recordings, things like that. Now I have heard some recordings of things that I've heard in the woods my whole life growing up here that I know for a fact are red wolves. That's what they are. You probably have them right there where you are. And it's this Sasquatch mating call is what someone, how they would know that, I don't know. But that's what it was called. And I was like, I've heard that. That's a red wolf. I've seen them, you know, run through after doing these howls, these long haul howls. And so that's another part of it, the audio. But there's some audio out there. Of course, you're not seeing what's doing it, but it's really convincing stuff. So to me, I think that stuff is important. But I think you're right about the pictures, especially the blurry ones. Hey, this is what this is right here. Yeah, that stuff's got to go. Sorry.
You know, also people's testament saying far more than the photo. And when you're going to talking about video, Kerry, this is video like you're seeing something and videoing it, not videoing something, going home, looking at it and going, oh, something moved. That doesn't count for me. I think if you're capturing, you know, you have to know it was there, because that's so easy to go back over a video and find something, some pareidolia or some parallax or some, you know, you could never be 100% sure unless you know you were there and saw it. I think there's just so much of that out there that it's just, you know, it's spoiling it. But anyway,
no, you're right. And, you know, talking about testimonials, and I don't know if this would make a big difference these days, but the way that Bigfoot sightings are reported has changed dramatically. But going back to the late 1950s, John Green was actually having Bigfoot eyewitnesses sign sworn affidavits in front of a magistrate, like a legally binding thing, that this is what happened to me, which is, you know, to me, it didn't really make a big difference at the time, but it showed, you know, a lot more, you know, in terms of an eyewitness testimonial, it gave it a lot more credibility, right? Who'd be willing to risk legal jeopardy? In the 60s and 70s and 80s, part of the 80s, people would have Bigfoot sightings. They would call the police, and they would call the police out there and file a report, and then it would be in the newspaper, and their names would be published in the newspaper. That's sticking your neck out. If you're willing to file a police report, which obviously lying to law enforcement is against the law, and then you're willing to have your name published in the newspaper, to me, that's a lot more convincing as far as, you know, I'm willing to stand behind what I saw, as opposed to this day and age when you have, you know, people are just posting their sightings anonymously on different websites. And, you know, I mean, not to question people's, you know, credibility, but those types of sightings, obviously, in my opinion, don't carry as much weight because you're not really risking anything by saying that you had a Bigfoot sight. So anyways, it'd be interesting to see if people would be willing to take that up again and report their sightings to law enforcement or sign sworn oaths and things like. I don't know if people would do that, but that would be interesting if that were to kind of take root again.
Well, I think things have come along, like the BFRO and other organizations that have become pretty well known, that this is who people contact now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, those guys weren't around to contact then, so they contacted law enforcement. And, you know, we have another channel, it's called the SHUDDER, and we do narrations on there. I do narrations on there, and that's what I do. A lot of those affidavits, the ones that have a story to it. You know, a lot of them are just a report, and the way they're written, there's nothing there to tell. You know, just what happened, and you know, when you're doing a narration, that doesn't count. But there are some there that are really good stories from 1896 all the way to the 1940s. Like you said, that's when you find these affidavits. I haven't found one older than 1955. That was worth telling. That was an actual story. But no, you're absolutely right. If we could do that, but I think because you have the BFRO and these other organizations and websites, you know, there are a dime a dozen now that have these sightings. They want people to call them and report their sightings. I think that's who they give it to now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which, you know, it's valuable because, I mean, they're still putting all of the sightings in a database, but, and I know a lot of those are also followed up on by various investigators that are assigned to, you know, interview the witness and things like that. But, you know, again, it goes back to, if we're trying to convince anyone outside of the Bigfoot community and the general public, which, by the way, as I write in my book, Essential Guide to Bigfoot, 82% of the population doesn't think Bigfoot could exist. If you think Bigfoot might exist, you're in the minority at 18% or so. So, you know, if we're trying to convince that other 82%, you know, we got to up our game, right?
Exactly. Absolutely. I think there's, to me, I'm sorry, Danielle, go ahead.
All right. Do you want to carry on? You can carry on.
I was just going to say, I think that several things have to go on. You know, aside from just having a picture or a video to throw out there, you need to be, there needs to be a story to your research, you know, like a journal of what you're doing, and put all of those things out there. Let everyone see exactly what you're doing. You know, if there's a behind the scenes, show that. Every single thing you're doing. It's just, it not only shows who you are, that you're not just some redneck out there beating on trees and screaming in the woods, that you're actually serious about this, because thanks to our mainstream media, it's a joke. You know, the majority of the people that see anything about this, it's either a Jack Link's beef jerky commercial, or it's a parody on the news. Yeah. So I think if we could get people to do more of the journal type, put everything you have out there, and even if you do get something, it's got that much more credibility to it.
You're right. Documentation. You're right. That would be very important. If researchers would take better notes, you know, a journal. This day I found this. I didn't find this. This is, you know, you're right. It's the proof is in the pudding. Those details sometimes are very important.
In terms of Bigfoot being, I mean, officially it's a cryptid, I guess, because it's not being classed. But we know there's lots of sightings. We know there's lots of encounters. We know it. This is a, you know, we think it's a flesh and blood animal. Let's go along that line that it is. So if you take something like Mothman, how many sightings of Mothman are there, and are they all over the place? And if they're not, why is that?
No, that's a great question. People ask me that a lot. Look, I've written a book about flying humanoids like Mothman. Cryptozoology has certainly evolved through the years. I don't personally, I'm an old school cryptozoologist. So cryptozoology, you know, to me has to emphasize the word zoology. So it has to be something that fits within the paradigm of the natural world, fossil record, and so forth. Mothman doesn't. Okay. I view it as more of a fringe, you know, the reason it's considered a cryptid is that originally when it was sighted in 1966 and 67, it wasn't even called Mothman. It was called the bird, the Mason County bird. That's how it appeared in the newspapers. And some of the original eyewitnesses, in fact, described what they saw as a giant man-sized bird, not a weird, you know, creature with glowing red eyes and so forth. That said, that more people did report this weird man-like creature with the big red glowing eyes and stuff, which just doesn't make any sense zoologically speaking. So I tend to view these flying humanoids as more of a supernatural, metaphysical type phenomenon, and that's not what I'm an expert in or trained to do. But it's a fascinating subject as well. But you have these different fringe cryptids like the Mothman and now quote unquote Dogman, which has really become popular, which to me, in my opinion, I think they're more metaphysical type things. That doesn't mean they don't have a physical presence of some kind. People do report seeing them, finding scratch marks on their cars or whatever. But it's a completely different animal in terms of something compared to Bigfoot or even some of the lake monsters and thunderbirds and things like that seem to have, they fit within, even though their existence would still be extraordinary because they shouldn't be alive in this time period. There are things like them in the fossil history, and they make sense. A lot of them make sense zoologically speaking. But Mothman is a worldwide phenomenon, Daniela. I've interviewed witnesses all over the world, from Mexico to Europe, different places. The descriptions are somewhat different, more variant than something like Bigfoot. So it seems like, again, that seems to me to indicate some kind of weird, and I'm not even going to speculate what the cause would be. I think it's just too far beyond my realm of comprehension. But these things do seem to appear at the time and place of their choosing. I don't think they're from here. I don't know. I think they're manifestations of something, energy or something. And people do have real experiences. And I know that the eyewitnesses that I've interviewed have been profoundly impacted and even traumatized by their experiences. So these are very real experiences to them. But you can't look for Mothman in terms of something like Bigfoot. That is, you're not going to go out in the woods and set some bait and camera traps, and you're not tracking an animal. I really think it's more of something for the people that are interested in kind of paranormal, supernatural investigations.
Well, what about the unusual reports connected to Bigfoot then that some people have, like say, well, let's not say cloaking, but mind speak, healing. I've heard, disappearing.
Yeah, dematerializing, getting shot 100 times and running off.
UFOs next to the
glowing red eyes.
Yeah.
People ask me about that a lot too. Now, we all have different experiences, and other people out there have had different experiences investigating than I have. But in my broad experience, and looking at, again, all the information and the thousands of sightings that have been documented through the years, those sightings you're describing make up just a tiny, tiny fraction. So I think people, instead of focusing on kind of the minutia of those specific reports, I think they need to broaden their scope and say, okay, we have 6,000 Bigfoot sightings. 5,900 of those include very natural things. The Bigfoot walks across the road at night. It's walking through the woods. It's drinking water. It's behaving just like a natural animal. So the accounts you're describing with the glowing orbs and the weird dematerializing, at least in my experience, those make up just such a tiny fraction that you can't really consider that a significant part of the evidence. Now, I know investigators in the Midwest, like Stan Gordon in Pennsylvania, that's found a lot of that evidence. And so from his perspective, he thinks that Bigfoot must be some type of interdimensional or something, because he's come across more of that. But from my own perspective, and most Bigfoot, I just don't think there's enough evidence for that stuff.
Yeah. I actually interviewed Stan a couple of weeks ago. He's a really interesting guy. So many reports, unusual. I'll just end that with, sometimes I wonder if people, find it hard enough to tell you that they've seen Bigfoot, are they actually going to disclose all that happened? Because, there's that possibility as well, isn't there? That they think, okay, seeing Bigfoot's crazy enough, I can't tell them about the whatever. I don't know, but it's a possibility. I think we've got some questions. We do.
Yes, we do. It's that time. Andy says, what is the strangest encounter stories you've heard or seen? Anything? Just give us one. What do you think?
Oh, gosh.
I know.
Let's schedule a few more shows.
That's one of those.
you know, I'm a conduit because people see me on TV. I'm a conduit for all kinds of strange reports that people want to, and I'm always very respectful. I don't criticize people, but gosh. Okay. Well, you guys have probably heard of like Black Panthers, right? These alien big cats. Daniela, there in England, you have the Beast of Exmoor and Bodmin Moor and all those, Surrey Puma and all those. Here in North America, and you've probably come across some of these too, Kerry, down there in Mississippi, people saying they seen these Black Panthers in the woods that aren't supposed to be here. These big black cats.
Yeah,
so there are a lot of those reports.
Stuff.
Well, just recently I heard from a woman in West Virginia who claimed she saw a winged Black Panther. So it was kind of she was very sincere and credible. I saw this Black Panther, but it had wings. It had these giant feathered wings. So it was, so occasionally you get those kinds of sightings where it's like, kind of combining two different things. So that's pretty weird. Some of the flying humanoid sightings, I interviewed a cop in Mexico, in Monterrey, Mexico, years ago that claimed that a flying witch flew onto the hood of his patrol car. And this was actually pretty big news in Mexico. He was found passed out in his police car after he called for help, back up. And he claimed this this witch with giant black lidless eyes and brown skin and a hooded thing was floating through the air. And she jumped on his police car and clawed at his windshield, and that caused him to pass out. And so I interviewed him years ago on the show Monster Quest. And I mean, throughout the course of our interview, he was sobbing and breaking down. So, I mean, this guy he's a pretty tough guy, cop in a really tough neighborhood in Monterrey, Mexico. So, you get those accounts too. And that was pretty convincing because, I mean, here's this guy, what reason would he have to make up this story? But he was still on the police force, by the way. So
I'm sure a lot of these people believe exactly what they saw, but perception is reality. Yeah. And our senses are flawed, especially if we're under stress or anything like that. Something like that comes out and it may not be exactly what it was, but it's what you saw and what you experienced. So, and it may be exactly what it was. Who in the heck knows? Didn't mean to cut you off there. It's
good points. But that's just two. But I mean, I could go on and on. I've heard a lot of weird accounts through the years.
Hanging with Honey says, do you know of anyone who's been attacked by a bugger?
No, actually, I don't know anyone that's been physically assaulted unless you include, and I've never met him, but like Bobby Ford was a guy up in Fouke, Arkansas back in 1972. This is in the movie The Legend of Boggy Creek, which is a very influential kind of Southern Bigfoot movie we've all seen. But Bobby Ford and his family were kind of terrorized by this, supposedly the Fouke monster, this booger on their property. And they finally went out with some guns to try to drive it off. And he claims that this thing basically attacked him or scratched him, and he had to be rushed to the hospital. I mean, it ran off after it. One of the theories is he just ran into it, and it might have just one of those chance things, but he was rushed to the hospital. And that was kind of a big focal part of the movie, The Legend of Boggy Creek. But overall, I'm not a proponent of hyper aggressive activity by Bigfoot or Sasquatch. And as I write about in my book, I literally think that Bigfoot is more afraid of us than we are of it. I think that that's why we can't find them, because it's a very retreating, reticent animal, very intelligent, and it understands that we are its greatest threat and the most dangerous thing that it runs across. So it tries to avoid humans at all cost. Like all animals, even humans, it can defend its territory and get aggressive if you catch it, by surprise or something. So there's the potential there, but I just want to dispel a lot of that mythology about Bigfoot being, or boogers being, super aggressive and dangerous to humans. I don't think that.
Well, you just have a direct line to my brain. I swear. We think exactly the same things. They think, enough people have heard my opinions on here enough. I have heard of several people being attacked. There's the Bowman incident from Teddy Roosevelt Road, whether it's true or not.
Oh yeah.
Where the guy gets killed, and you've got several, but there's one that we took, a guy that got attacked down in Florida. He was hunting, walking out on one of the levees, and he says this 6-foot chimpanzee jumps out, screams, jumps out on him. He's wearing coveralls and he's got a 22 pistol right here. He's almost to his truck. And it's it's screaming in his face, and it's on top of him, and it's beating the ground. And he pulls this 22 pistol out, and he said this thing's eyes get like this big, like it knew, it had made a mistake, and he shot it in the head. He said, I don't think it was a 22, it like grazed or whatever, and it ran off. And he said he heard it crying, like wailing, like, oh, it was this incredible report.
Wow.
that we took, myself and Mark Zasky from Florida actually took that in 2016. So it was the only real attack. I think they're all situational. I think just attacking out of the blue, I think you got to cross a line with them, like you were saying. Absolutely. Hilton says, what's the story with that awesome hat, Ken? What is the story with that? It's a nice hat.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, we've been through a lot together, this hat and I.
It's a registered trademark, huh?
Yeah, it's shrunk through the years. It's definitely gotten smaller and curled up. I've worn it in Alaska at night when it was 30 degrees below zero. I've worn it in the jungles of Central America when it was over. So it's had some extreme temperatures. But basically, I used to be the singer in a kind of a crazy band. We did like heavy kind of Rob Zombie, Nine Inch Nails, industrial music. Nice. And so for 20 years, I was a touring musician, recording artist, and I kind of wore the hat, started wearing the hat. I bought it in Toronto when we were on tour at a place called Doc's Leather on Queen Street. And it's kind of a custom job. I had them put the skull on the hat, which they had already made the hat, and I had the skull. So that's it. Yeah, it's just, it's my trademark. And, it's allowed me to, I was a little bit, when I first started wearing it, when I first started getting into the Bigfoot scene real heavily about 20 years ago, I wanted people to remember me because, and I got to admit, I meet a lot of people in the Bigfoot field and I remember almost everyone, but sometimes you get in those embarrassing situations where you've met someone before and you can't quite remember where or how or,
right.
or so it just gives people something to say, oh, it's that guy.
I mean, do you ever get confused with Lyle?
Oh, all the time. Yeah. It happens all the time. People come up to me and say, man, I love that Boggy Creek book. And they tell him, yeah, I saw you on Monster Quest or whatever. We have a lot of fun with it. We finally figured out, well, this way we can be two places at once. We'll just be like one person with two personalities. But what I tell people about that is it's just a case of convergent evolution, because Lyle and I, we grew up listening to the same music, into the same things, monsters and different things, the outdoors. And he's a singer in a band. I was a singer in a band. So it's just, we just had a lot of similar influences, and we both just were drawn to this hat style. That's all there is to it. So.
That's awesome.
I've lost one of the questions, but Zach, Rooted Expeditions, asked what's your scariest encounter or come close to experience?
Mm-hmm. Sure. August 18th, 2003, I was investigating Bigfoot activity at a place called Cottonwood Lake in North Texas, near the Oklahoma border. I was with Chester Moore and two other investigators. Pretty remote lake. We'd heard there'd been recent sightings there. Just after dark, we were hiking around the lake, and suddenly we heard something that sounded just like an ape that was grunting at us through the brush. We couldn't see it. It was about 40 yards away. I recorded the sounds. I still have them. It sounded just like an angry, it was very loud, very powerful. All of us are Texas outdoorsmen, lifelong Texas outdoorsmen. So we were all able to look at each other immediately and drop F-bombs and say, we don't know what that is. That's not anything we've ever heard before. And we didn't see it. We tried to flush it out. I had a camera. We only had one gun. And to his credit, Chester kind of tried to flush it out, but we couldn't do that. We moved to a higher vantage point, and we shined a spotlight down in the spot where we'd seen it. And we did get some eye shine, but we couldn't tell, how tall or, and then we camped out, and this thing was moaning at us throughout the night, because kind of making this wailing, this really creepy kind of moaning, wailing sound. And it would answer us. If we'd call to it, it would answer back and stuff. And so all that was crazy. And then the following morning, we finally made our way through the brush where we'd heard this thing, and we found deep footprints. and we found a number of turtle shells that had been ripped in half top to bottom and thrown into a kind of a pile. There was no flesh left on the turtle shells. It was just like pistachio shells, you know, that were thrown in a pile. And I was like, man, there is nothing that I know of that can rip a turtle shell in half. I've owned many turtles through the years, and, you know, so all of that to me was like the most convincing thing that I've personally experienced, where I thought, wow, this has got to be real now. You know, I'm 90%, I'm still not 100% because I haven't seen it with my own eyes, but I tell people I'm 90% convinced that Bigfoot exists based on that experience.
Well, it's got to be pretty profound to remember the exact day and date. You know, you nailed down, I'm sure it was stamped on the recording and that you've gone over many times, but to remember the exact date. And when you had that experience, did you want to leave? Did you feel like you wanted to, or did you want to go get this thing?
Yeah, we wanted to find it. And I mean, you know, I'm not beating my chest here, but to my credit, there have been 2 other times when I've been in the woods and we thought with other researchers and we thought there was a Bigfoot close by, and I ran to it. Where I had some, you know, you have that voice in your head that's kind of warning you about a better judgment. But, you know, what I always tell myself is this is my job. You know, it's like, yeah, this is what I'm paid to do, is to prove this thing real. If it's 100 yards over there, then I'm going to try to get close enough to it to get some kind of proof or evidence. So
the reason I asked, there's a reason for it, and it wasn't to question you at all, but we run into this a lot. I mean, it's a hell of a sacrifice that someone's going to have to make to get this thing clear footage moving through the woods. Somebody's going to have to do this and go after it. But we find so many times there's people that go out there to experience this. They're going just to look for Bigfoot. They hear a growl or something. Oh, time to go. And they leave, you know? So that's why I asked, and it wasn't a dig on you at all.
No, not at all. But I'm just telling people, you know, and maybe this goes back to but again, I don't think that it's, you know, out to get me. You know, I think it's basically, it's right there. I'm here. It's probably scared of me. I'm scared of it, but you know, I want to prove that it exists. I mean, that's the bottom line. So, well,
I think you have the right preconceived notions about this thing. I mean, obviously they can be dangerous, but you go in prepared. You're ready to, whatever the consequences are, we have to get this thing on camera. And I think that's the important thing. A lot of people don't think about. I think most people that actually go and look for this creature aren't expecting to even hear anything at all. So, and when they do, we actually weren't ready. So I think that's the biggest thing. Prepare yourself.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, given the opportunity, will Ken ever try to talk to a Sasquatch in order to gain an understanding from them? It seems that that's the next step. So if you saw one and went to it, would you try and go, how? Or
well, I think, if you knew enough about Bigfoot literature, the key terms would be soka soka and ook ook. I think is one that different people that claim that they've heard these things and try to speak. You know, that's kind of a nice sentiment. You know, I do think Bigfoot is highly intelligent. Obviously, I don't think it's quite as smart as Homo sapiens, but it's smarter than anything else out there in the animal kingdom. Obviously, that's why we can't find it. So these are sentient beings. But you know, I try to separate a lot of the kind of, you know, what we were talking about earlier, where a lot of people kind of view Bigfoot as more of a, you know, a sort of a supernatural entity, like a you know, something that's bringing in light. I'm trying to bring enlightenment to humankind, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful of anyone else's views if that's what they think necessarily. I would try to communicate with a Bigfoot, sure, if I felt like I wasn't in danger at that point. If I was standing a few yards away and it wasn't acting aggressively towards me, maybe I would try to communicate with it with hand gestures or something. I don't know. I should be so lucky, but I'm not looking to, you know, be enlightened by them. I don't necessarily view them as, you know, kind of spiritual beings so much. And I think a lot of people that are trying to make that connection with Bigfoot kind of view them as more of a spiritual type entity that's bringing knowledge and enlightenment. And I would just want to befriend it to the point where it was comfortable enough with me to take a picture or cut off some of its hair. Or
make sure that red light's on, man.
Clip its toenail or something. I don't know.
Make sure that red light is on. You know, to me, you'd think if that were the case, that they were trying to bring us enlightenment, that they would actually be doing that. And that just doesn't seem to be the case in most instances. I think it's a trust issue that these things are predisposed to hiding. They're just born to hide, even in the dark. They're hiding.
Yeah.
So that that brings apart along the why we haven't found a body question. And
they're built to avoid us.
Sure.
It's their primary adaptation. If they're going to survive, and there's not many of them left, they have to avoid being exterminated by Homo sapiens, and they realize that, I think.
And they're very good at it. And a creature, aware of itself and predisposed to this hiding from us, if they do die and have a dead body, why would they leave it around for us to find? They're gonna do something with it for sure.
Yeah.
I think Grover Krantz always used the argument, you don't find many bears, which I didn't think was the greatest argument we had for, why we haven't found a body, but it is still a decent one. If they are out there, they're probably not lasting very long wherever they are, but I think they do something with them just so nobody finds them.
It could be, sure.
Let's take one more and we'll get out of here.
Yeah, there was one. Where's it gone? Sorry about this. It was Jamie.
Jamie, I didn't see it.
Thoughts on Chupacabra?
Chupacabra. What do you think?
Chupacabra, it's a complex subject, but I'll just explain it to people like this, because they're always asking me, how come the Chupacabra in Puerto Rico looks different than the Chupacabras that I'm seeing in the newspaper in Texas or whatever? What I tell people is that the name Chupacabra, which means goat sucker in Spanish, is, in my opinion, kind of a catch-all name that's been associated with a lot of different mystery animals and creatures. It's a case of what I call composite identity. So it's being applied to different things, okay? Remember, it describes a behavior, not a physical appearance, okay? It's describing something that drinks in a blood-like fashion. Now, starting in the 1990s in Puerto Rico, the island of Puerto Rico, we started getting reports of the Chupacabra. It was killing livestock, and it was this 3-foot-tall goblin-like creature with big eyes and spikes down its back and a forked tongue. That's one thing. Here in Texas, where I live, starting in 2004, there were mysterious livestock killings that involved chickens being allegedly drained of their blood. And then shortly thereafter, the chicken farmers shot these weird dog-like animals that were weird looking. They were hairless. They had kind of a bluish gray skin. They had long teeth, and they didn't look like coyotes or any other dog because they were hairless and they had other physical. And those eventually became Chupacabras too, because they were linked with this alleged blood drinking activity. Subsequently, investigators here in Texas, we've begun to refer to these animals as the Texas blue dogs, because they are canids. They've been DNA tested. They're coyotes. They're coyote wolf hybrids. They're domestic feral dogs that are hairless, that have weird teeth, that have other physical abnormalities. And it could be a disease. Some mange could be part of it, but it could also be a genetic thing where they're having a mutation or something like that. So, yeah, there are different types of Chupacabras. That's what I guess the point I'm trying to make is it's not one blanket type. In fact, you'll find sightings of Chupacabras in Mexico and Chile that have wings that are like giant bats. So again, it refers to mysterious animals that primarily drink blood, which, by the way, is a zoological and biological issue, because bats are the only higher vertebrates that can technically have the proper adaptations to consume blood as a main food source. For other animals, it might be an anomaly. There's a theory that one of the reasons that these animals are drinking the blood of animals and not eating the flesh, which is what you would expect typically from a predator, is because they have diseases and certain mineral deficiencies. So, for example, if they're craving iron, they may kill a chicken and drink its blood because they're craving this infusion of iron or other minerals. It's just a theory, but it's interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
So Chupacabra is more of a title.
Yeah, it's a title. And also, if you understand that, and where I live in San Antonio, obviously we have 75% of the population is Mexican American. I love the Latino culture. Chupacabra is a Latino name, and so it's used. It's kind of like the boogeyman. It's kind of a monster. It's a boogeyman. That's why it's applied by Hispanic people to a lot of different types of monsters.
Well,
interesting.
awesome. Well, Ken Gerhard, thank you so much for coming on. Please come back and join us. I just want to let everybody know you can go to kengerhard.com and you can find in the description, you'll be able to find the essentials, the essential guide to Bigfoot, Wood Knox, Volume 1, Journal of Sasquatch Research, and a menagerie of mysterious beasts. We'll have those in the links here, but still visit kengerhard.com. I'm sure you've got all your other books in there that people can get. I've got the essential guide to Bigfoot. As soon as it comes here, I'm going to read that. I'm going to give a report on it. So
awesome.
Just for
guys,
you.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you. I appreciate your support and your time. Hope you guys have a good night, and everyone stay safe out there. Okay. Take care of each other and stay safe.
Absolutely. We thank you for coming on this Saturday on Hidden Existence. Make sure you go subscribe to Hidden Existence. That's where the next researcher's report is going to be. Daniela will be interviewing.
Well, my guest had to cancel, so it's going to be a surprise.
It's up in the air. It'll be a surprise. But it'll be same bat time, different bat channel. So research report Saturday. Next Wednesday, we've got who here next Wednesday?
We haven't.
Up in the air still. All right. We're flying by the seat of our pants. Thank you guys for joining us here. 7:00 p.m. Central Saturday. Make sure you guys go to Hidden Existence. Y'all have a good night. Take care.
Good night.